quite an exhaustive conversation there. But while the joy from the victory of the Super Eagles persists, the realities back home remain, and that's the rising prices of food and the response of the federal government. Of course, we heard that the president has directed measures that will see to the reduction of the prices of food. But what are those measures, and how long does that committee have? We're joined for more on this by the Special Advisor to the President on Economic Matters, Mr. Fasua. Mr. Fasua joins us from our Abuja studios. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Fasua.
Good morning.
Yes, and right after that meeting with the economic managers during the Senate plenary just 2 days ago, we had the Minister of Information brief the press, and he talked about...
I can't hear anymore.
Hello, Mr. Fasua, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had the Minister of Information brief revealing that Mr. President has directed that a committee be set up to see to the implementation of measures that will see to the reduction of the prices of food. Walk us through that and how that will help.
Right. Thank you very much. It's the right thing to do, and we saw the committee meeting a couple of just yesterday as well. You know, and the key people that can make things happen are there. The minister, the coordinating minister for the economy, the minister of agric, budget and planning, down the line. Of course, the chief of staff, the deputy chief of staff, everybody was in there. And of course, that's just to tell you, the president came back in 2 days ago, and the moment he hit the ground, the point was he took this up and actually directed that meeting be had. And of course, the government still has the levers of control to do the right thing, and also to diffuse any untoward thing that's about to happen in the society. For example, there's people have suggested maybe there should be some release of grains from the grains reserve. Most countries have that, and Nigeria does have as well. And that may end up, helping to reduce prices of grains, especially. Earlier, I was listening to Kayode and the other gentleman earlier, talking about the volatility in the prices of goods. Well, I wouldn't call it volatility. Volatility is when you have something going up and down in a very, if you like, violent manner. But this, I think what really concerns people is the spikes in the prices of goods, especially food. And that brings up the issue of, the process of price formation in the country. How do people arrive at prices? How do retailers set prices? How do middlemen and distributors set prices? Sometimes a lot of things go into that, including political issues, including emotions. Someone gets very angry and jacks up the prices of what he's selling and say, well, let the government deal with it. So all of those issues will have to be brought to the table to say, how do people set prices? What can we do to ensure, without actually tinkering with the process of demand and supply, but to ensure that people are responsible to society, and that people who can don't take advantage just because they can. So all of those issues, I believe, will be discussed. There are also issues, for example, I was in the Kano area a couple of weeks back, and because of the relative weakness in the value of the naira, there's a lot of exports going on of food items. For example, our maize is being exported, through, as I said, the Niger Republic borders and so on, because the CFA is suddenly stronger. Now, whereas one of the aims of depreciating the value of a country's currency is to enable such export, the point is, are we capturing the export proceeds? Equally, I understand that people are also hedging by buying commodities, hedging the value of their currency because they know that if they buy commodities, they could sell in dollars at any point in time. Yeah, these are cash crops that we're talking about, like soya bean, like sorghum, like sesame seeds, and so on. And that's been going on. So I think where things are right now is that the government will have to bring everybody together, and that's the process that has started. And they said, according to the reports that we saw, that everybody's going to be brought to the table, including distributors, including middlemen, including exporters, including commodity traders, who have. So it takes very proper understanding. Apart from that, the Minister of Agriculture also said that we will be seeing, a ramping up of the efforts to cultivate more land, and within a cycle of 3 months to begin to get a lot more out of the ground. There's this 500,000 hectares initiative that the ministry is working on, which I believe will yield a lot of efforts and results as things go on. Now, mind you that what's called the cost of living crisis is a global phenomenon as well, must be said. Some countries have gone through the worst of their own. I remember just about a year ago in the UK, the US, and it was also almost this bad in terms of increases in prices. I mean, some commodities went up as much as 30%, which is ordinarily unimaginable in such economies, but that's what has happened. The challenge we have is to put in place the kind of intellectual infrastructure, the kind of regulatory infrastructure that they have that ensures that things don't go leaping in bounds like 50%, 100% like we have here. And we have to put this in place, not just for the moment, but for the future of this country. And I think we're getting there.
So I want to find out from you, Mr. Fasua, which is a concern for a lot of people. As an economist, do you see that is this the worst? And if better is tomorrow, what does better look like? A layman's understanding of better is a reduction, perhaps significant reduction in prices of goods and services. But I don't know from a professional point of view what it is that you will say it will look like. So if this is worse, for instance, what does better look like? So we can begin to hold on to something rather than just, all of this.
Oh, great question. And I think better is that, the reforms that the government has done are very tough reforms, must be said. The one on the fuel subsidy, the one on unifying the Naira, which led to the depreciation in the value of the Naira. And I just told you now that we're seeing a lot more exports. I was reading, the newspapers the other day. There's a company in Lagos called Wemi Industries, and the local producers of FMCGs, that's fast-moving consumer goods like toiletries and so on. And they're now exporting, according to their own statement, exporting as far as Mali, not to talk of places like Cameroon, Republic of Benin, up to Ghana and so on. So that's one is going. However, a better would be a scenario where, number one, as a result of the reforms, the economy starts to grow. As a result of the reforms, people begin to get more jobs. And you know what? Even with the jackpot phenomenon, there are jobs in this country now. Honestly, I've talked to many industries and they're looking for staff. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to be a PhD holder. People should avail themselves and stop being cynical, believing that, oh, the country is going down, I can't even, you have to keep trying. They're looking for staff in many places, even in the private sector, despite the advent of artificial intelligence and what have you. So the future a better future will be that these jobs come on board, that small businesses are able to do more in terms of what they're doing and what they're selling, and then also a better future will be, in the interim, that everybody will earn a little bit more than they were earning. Now, and when you're talking about the issue of minimum wage rising and all of that, which also came on board in the talks, I think, yesterday, we have to remember that the NLC is pushing for minimum wage increase, which is valid, but the NLC probably controls a very small fraction of the working population. According to the MBS, 88% of Nigerians work in a structured environment. And in a unstructured environment, not so many of them are unionized. What it means is that people wake up and hustle and just try something. And even if they're unionized, are they under the NLC, and can they guarantee minimum wage for themselves? For example, Union of Welders, Union of Mechanics, Union of washmen who wash clothes for people. They can't actually begin to agitate. So we need to give them a voice as well. Part of what the government intends to do, the government of the day intends to do, is to see that, look, if we need to encourage those gentlemen and those people who work in that space to form guilds and be able to have a voice. So that apart from the voice of the NLC, which basically takes care more for government workers who can ask for minimum wage, what are we doing with these guys that are downtrodden, who many times when they work for you, you ask them, what is your charge? They say, well, give me whatever it is you can. And those are the ones that are much more impacted by some of this phenomena that's going on, especially inflation. So a better future would be that people should earn more across the board, whether you were working for yourself or not, so that at least you can be able to survive in society. The inflation phenomenon is real. A better future will also be that we're able to better control increases in prices so that people can just not wake up and do anything they like. A lot of times unjustified, just out of sheer emotion, and people believe, well, let the government go and sort the problem out. I want to take my own and walk, because people, especially when you're selling stuff that you think that cannot be avoided by people must eat, for example. And so we need to also understand what's going on in that space. The farmers aren't getting the benefit of the increases in price. That is the truth. The farmers are probably even poorer than they used to be. So who's getting the benefit? Who's increasing the prices? Who's pocketing the money? There are new players in that sector that we haven't actually started to reckon with, and we must reckon with them, bring them to the table, ask what their motivations are, and also be able to check them. All over the world, this is done. I did my research, whether you're talking about the UK or the US or South Africa, farmers are not allowed to just sell their goods indiscriminately to anybody that comes to the farm gate. There's a limit to that in South Africa. In the UK, all farmers sell through their cooperatives in bulk, and so there's a coordination, and those are some of the infrastructure that I mentioned we haven't had yet. And of course, I've had cause to talk about shrinkflation, which is a scenario where producers of goods reduce sometimes the quality and the quantity of goods inside the pack, and they still sell it to you at the same rate. Or even when you saw in the market, some guys leak out maybe liters of rice. Maybe they can leak 10 kg out of a bag of 50 kg, repack that and resell, and then you're buying 40 kg instead of 50 kg. That is called shrinkflation, and it's everybody's duty. I just wrote an article out in the Cable and Premium Times. That is, is shrinkflation. It's everybody's duty to make sure that wherever you are, you're vigilant. If people are trying to cheat others, because the rest of us are the ones that are bearing the brunt, let's stand up for ourselves. It's not just a government matter. It's a matter for governments, a matter for state governments as well, because the state governments and the local governments are closer to the farmers. They need to understand what's going on at that level, so that we all save ourselves from all of this calamity.
Well, Mr. Fasua, and I think that speaks to the tweet you put up recently, which got a lot of people talking. Some were maybe even shocked by that tweet, where you said over the weekend you did a market survey, and you said the inflation is killing. You said you have informed the bosses. You went on to highlight some possible solutions to this, and it was targeted particularly at state government. You said state governments are getting double the FAC. All of them are busting their budgets this year. They should please start to pay old salaries, gratuities, and pensions. They should pay old contractors. They should urgently issue contracts for projects with high local content. You gave example like roads and housing, and essentially. And a lot of people got talking first, and when you said inflation is killing, they were like, okay, well, this is what we've been experiencing. But it's good to see that kind of messaging from government. So
My question is in two prongs. One, when you said you have informed the bosses, I imagine that you're giving some advice to the bosses, and I imagine you're talking about the president whom you report to. So what kind of messaging are you giving the president? What has been his response? Then on the other side is people who are saying, aren't you just trying to pass the buck? The federal government has its work cut out for it already. So what is the federal government doing that the states can copy? Because they say charity begins at home. So two-pronged. What have you told the bosses? What did the boss say? And the other one.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what's important there is to let you know that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and, of course, Vice President Kashim Shettima, who I, on a daily basis sit with, they encourage us to continue to interact with the community, and they also do that as well, so that a special advisor doesn't mean I still go to the market, I have my customers in the market, I do that very frequently, and I also document that as well. However, going to see that, the prices of food was skyrocketing, I was alarmed, and of course I let, I have many bosses, I let some of them know that, look, this is what's happening, at least the ones I could reach immediately. So that's that, so it's real. If we're not sitting in our ivory towers and, basically thumbing our noses at the people. We are also going to the same market anyway. So I think it's very important for anyone in government to try and do that from time to time. And I try to take my initiative as well because, I'm supposed to be looking at the economy from every angle. That said, whereas you asked a question about what's the federal government doing now, the point is that there's always this laser focus on the federal government, as if federal government can solve every problem. Like I told you about the farm gate issues and what they've done in developed countries, which we're also modeling after. Those are things that need to be done, understood by the state government. So a state governor sitting in his capital to understand that, look, the most of the food items that we're talking about that's giving us issues are coming from, his backyard. Not necessarily, I mean, Abuja is where the federal government sits. Abuja is not a farming city, for example. It's not a farming, it's not, not a lot of that goes on, even though quite a bit, there's a Kuje area where a lot of people do mechanized farming and on a very massive scale. But that's not supposed to be the fulcrum for the economy. The food belts, we know, and every state in this country, they have farmers and they bring out products from time to time. So, so that's it. So whereas the federal government, if we look at the 2024 budget, very ambitious budget, 28.7 trillion, and for the first time, we're having much more in terms of capital budgeting than recurrent. We're reducing deficit, substantially to about 3.34% from 6% and all of that. A very fantastic budget, it must be said, that begins to tell a direction of where the federal government wants to do, and the states can also look at that. However, on this very instance, very situation, the states have an opportunity, and I'm actually quickly calling the attention to the arbitrage advantage that the states enjoy, equally at the federal level. But if you look at the states, for example, the total budget of all of our states is 15.9 trillion on paper. However, if you look at the fact that we're in February now, in January there was 1.1 trillion that was, allocated at the FAC, Federal Account Allocations Committee, to the states. If you multiply that by 12, we're talking about 13 trillion. So 13 trillion from FAC alone, and you're looking at 15.9 trillion is what everybody budgets. So by the time you add the IGR, a state like Lagos even gets a lot more from IGR than from their FAC. And Lagos has budgeted 2.25 trillion this year. That means that Lagos, if everything goes fine, and if this kind of fact keeps coming in, Lagos should probably be looking at 3 trillion in terms of spending this year. And of course, that dovetails down the rest of the states. And they enjoy an advantage. If people are complaining that they don't have money to buy food and all of that, and inflation is killing and all of that, that means that this extra cash that the states are getting, they should look at paying down some of their contractors. And of course, if any of them are still owing salaries, and I believe some of them may be, in those states I understand at least, maybe owing about 6 to 7 months salary. That's where I'm from. This is a good time for you to say, look, with this extra cash, let's begin to pay these people off so that people will complain less. Not everybody has to be looking up to the federal government and say, oh, Tinubu is doing this, Tinubu is doing that. The states should pay. And if they have pensions to pay or gratuities they're owing people, please pay. Start to pay now. However, the upside, the upshot of that is that that may lead to a lot more liquidity in the system and inflation. But it's better to suffer some inflation than not have money to even feed at all, which is what people are complaining about in many places. Remember, except someone is earning very regularly and good salaries, you're likely to be under a lot of pressure. I found out that the small paint can of beans now costs about 5,000 naira. And where I went over the weekend was a place where they sell almost in bulk. When you come down to the retail areas, it's even a lot more expensive. So so I'm just quickly calling attention to the fact that this can happen, and also that contracts that have high local content, for example, road contracts, for example, housing, where the sand, the cement, the rocks and all the kind of chippings and so on that you need, including the paint, including the roof. To build a house in this country today, almost everything you want. For a low-cost house, everything you want you can source in this country. Okay, if you want to build a road today, the sand, the laterite, whatever it is you're using, up to the bitumen, you can source in this country today. Or if you want to build a cement road as well. So these are things that we can actually begin to do. And there's going to be a short time before these prices of the other factors of production, labor inclusive, land inclusive, will move up to the level where every other goods have moved up to. So that's an advantage, what they call an arbitrage advantage that I'm pointing the states to, that they need to move
Mr.
now, and very, very quickly in order to take this advantage. And that may also spur growth in the economy. In fact, the idea behind all of these reforms is to spur that growth.
Yeah, I'm sure that the states have heard you either directly or by proxy. You said earlier that there may be, some increase in prices of food and services, by emotion, by those who are selling, and that they would rather take advantage of the situation and let government take responsibility. I wonder if that is subject to an empirical study, because what remains fact is that government has removed fuel subsidy, and currently the pump price of petrol is over 600 naira per litre. I just wanted to put that on record. But the reason I asked the first question I asked earlier is because if we walk down memory lane, in May 2023, when the administration took office, the federal government put in place a state of emergency on food security. It was announced on behalf of the government by the president's then aide and Minister of Solid Minerals now, Mr. Adeli Alaki. And this is what he said at the time, that all matters pertaining to food and water availability and affordability as essential livelihood items be included within the purview of the National Security Council. And he also said, we shall create and support a national commodity board that will review and continuously assess food prices, as well as maintain a strategic food reserve that will be used as a price stabilization mechanism for critical grains and other food items. That was as far back as May 2023, when inflation was 22.4%. Today, food inflation is pushing towards 28%. So I wonder if you're reminding the federal government about this. And is there anything that is suggestive of the fact that there is a state of emergency on food security currently? And in relation to that, will there be any need in the first place for this committee that the federal government is setting up yet again to look at measures to reduce food prices?
Thank you very much. On your first comment, it is very empirical that the price affirmation system, the the price discovery system is not at par in Nigeria. Is not what the book says. It's not what we read in the textbooks. It is very much an empirical study, and I've also performed some of these studies myself, that each time, if the federal government, for example, if you increase petrol price by 10%, then transportation price goes up by 50%. Whereas the petrol is not the only thing that a car needs to move and all of that, you know. So that means that we have to be careful. It is also very empirical when you see people leaking rice from 50 kg bag. It's documented, it's on your WhatsApp. That's empiricism. That's something that can be verified, you know. So the issue then becomes, should we sit back and allow these things to go on, or should we have in place processes that will, you know, tackle people and say, you know what, you've increased your price by 100%. On what basis have you done that? You know, nobody's going to. Now, I've also done business abroad and seen how things are done. Every industry is very tightly regulated. Regulation is good for everybody and stabilizes industries. I think I was listening to, who was that recently, say, you know what? I don't get involved in any industry that's not regulated, and that's one of the billionaires around the world that was saying that, you know, regulation is good if it is done right. Regulation is not for the exploitation of companies and industries. You know, some people get it wrong. Some regulators get it wrong and look at the regulation in that manner. But it's not supposed to be. Every industry is regulated so that everybody understands that they're part and parcel of an economy and its progress. And people who try to cheat are dealt with and shown so that everybody else around will know that they can't just take advantage of people. That's that. You mentioned the food emergency on food security. That has been done in May 2023. What's going on now is just to kind of reiterate and remind everybody, and by the statement you made, you also reminded the federal government as well. I don't have to remind the federal government. You have also reminded the president that, look, this had been in place. So I think that every time you set up, you have policies such as that, sometimes it starts to wane. What has happened now and the new emergencies that we have is what has brought it back to the fore. Perhaps the food security issue, of course, as I then you'll see that I saw Malam Nuhu Ribadu, the NSA security advisor, in the meeting they had yesterday, which is very reassuring because food security, in fact, is the first security. The one thing that everybody needs every day is food and water, aside from any other thing else. So the reason why you saw NSA there is that food security declaration is still very substantive, only that it has now been moved up a notch, or several notches, to say that, look, this is now something we must deal with, and the people need to see exactly what the government is doing in terms of how these prices are going down, or how jobs are going to be available, or how people are going to get paid, or how people are able to increase slightly what they earn, whether they were working in structured or unstructured environment. So it is what it is. We need such things to wake everybody up once in a while, and I believe that we're going to be able to tackle it. Like I said, the depreciation of the value of the naira has made a lot of our food attractive to some of our neighbors. And that's the truth. However, when they sell, those who sell the commodities or those who hedge the commodities, the other issue is, are the export proceeds coming in? And of course, that is where the central bank comes in. Because you look at some of the reforms at the central bank now, you know that they are not joking, including the command for the NNPC to ensure that all of their remittances in dollars, all of their sale proceeds, are domiciled at the central bank. The central bank has to have a clear line of sight to how much is coming in, not only with the NNPC, but also with other government-owned enterprises, which at some point in time, incredibly, we sort of took our eyes off the ball. But now, everything is being accounted for. And you know what? This country is actually at the epoch of greatness. What the reforms that the government has boldly taken on are such reforms that attempts to create a new economy. And we should be very, very mindful of that. We're creating a new economy, ensuring accountability, ensuring that, look, we reboot this economy from the ground up. It's not going to be easy, but at least we have actually commenced on that front.
All right. There are a couple of questions. You've just mentioned the issue of the NNPC, for instance, and but at the bottom of all of this, I'm sure as economists you know this as well, and a lot of people seem to agree that at the bottom, at the basics, is the fact that we're not producing as a country. We're import dependent as a country. So you see limitation in terms of FX and high demand for FX. I heard Olayemi Cardoso, the CBN governor, talking about the demand for FX for medical and education tourism between a decade hitting over 40 billion, bigger than even our FX reserve and all of that. So that tells us about the issue of production. But I want to take it down to the ordinary man, which is a bit of reality check I want you to help us do so that we can brace up. The reason is because when the issue of refineries came up, whether it's the Port Harcourt refinery and all other refineries and the Dangote refinery, the initial impression people had was, oh, with these refineries coming upstream, fuel prices or PMS prices will go down. But as we began to see things evolve, economists began to explain to us that, look, even the GCEO of NNPCL came and said, look, it doesn't necessarily mean prices will go down, but energy security will be assured. Now, prices have actually gone up in other things. I can read out for you. You've done the survey. It's 85% in price of rice gone up. Beans, or about 106% gone up. Onion, about 114% gone up. This from FDC, Financial Derivatives Company. So what is the reality check we should be doing for food? Should we just agree that prices will never come down? Let wage actually just meet up with prices, because we need to start preparing people than saying it will get better, which was the basis of my first question.
All right, so I think prices can come down, and government has not totally lost control on that front. You know, like I spoke about the different stakeholders in that sector, including commodity traders, including the farmers associations, what have you. And the government has also promised that at some point in time we're going to have commodity exchanges. A few of them have been licensed, it must be said, you know. And however, you know, we need them to actually really begin to do commodity exchange business, because commodity exchanges are just platforms where products are listed and people can sell into the future and buy in the future, and that creates that stability in the prices of things. Also, commodity boards. I personally believe in commodity boards, and I supported when President Tinubu actually suggested the idea of commodity boards. If you look at, you know that Ghana, the country called Ghana, actually borrowed about $800 million from its commodity board, the cocoa board. And that cocoa board, as at 2 years ago, they offered to help reintegrate Nigerian cocoa farmers into their cocoa board, because we had let our own go around 1986 when we bought the SAP. In the SAP era, you know, one of the things we did was dismantle the commodity boards, including the cocoa, our own cocoa board. Funny enough, imagine in 1965, in the southwest in Ibadan, we managed to build a 25-story house out of the activities of cocoa industry. And that building called Cocoa House remains the tallest building in the entire southwest, sans Lagos. In the entire, nobody has even come up with any such initiative since that time. That tells you that there's something in that cocoa board, or this idea of commodity boards, because it gives our farmers some sort of leverage to be able to come together and have a voice and act in structured environment. Because right now what we've done is left every farmer, we've kind of turned them into lone wolves. And lone wolves are very vulnerable, so people are taking them down and you know, negotiating hard and all of that stuff. So that's that. You know, in terms of productivity, of course, we know that basically we're just concentrated on crude oil. However, we of course, if we don't do crude oil, we also have cash crops that we sell. But what actually makes a country great is what's called economic complexity, meaning the knowledge quotient of the goods and services manufactured and sold from a country. Now, and of course, that's also what the present administration is trying to promote, to say that, look, we need to add value to whatever it is we produce. Now, the depreciation of the naira is actually impacting on that in a negative way, because even some of our local industries are saying that the inputs they need, for example, in cash crops, are being exported for dollar rather than being fed to our local industry, which is one of the things that the committee that has been set up and the food emergency will have to deal with. So, I think that let's continue to bring up some of these issues, because the committee has to have a very eclectic way of viewing the challenge that is on hand. But I think what's more important is that in the immediate term, something needs to be done for the people, and the common man needs to see the impact of government. Remember that the cash transfer process was shut down or basically suspended for a while because of the anomalies that we were seeing there. It's better to do it properly than to just allow money to get to waste. So now is the time for us to recalibrate. We can have a food program like they have in the United States of America, where the government itself buys in bulk from the farmers, and that helps to reduce or even eliminate food post-harvest losses. They buy, and then they're able to distribute to state reserves. Right. And I think that's where I believe that's where we're tending towards right now.
I think one of the immediate solutions or low-hanging fruits that even the House of Reps talked about is the release of grains to hungry Nigerians. To what extent that will be followed through with, and how soon is what we expect to see, and perhaps you can give us an insight. But, as we wind down, I wanted to speak to this. A lot of people were hoping that we can translate the victory, the success we're recording in AFCON, we can translate it into governance and economic issues so that we can celebrate all round. And it speaks to the point that when you're watching the football match from home, you seem to know everything. This person is not kicking the ball well, positioning is not right, he should have scored that goal. But then when you're on the pitch, when there are thousands of fans against you, when the humidity level is, literally killing, it's a different ball game entirely, and pun intended there. So speak to us. Before you became an aide to, government, you had lots of lofty ideas. You were the go-to person for economic issues, and you would lay those ideas. Now you are in government, so to speak. Have you had a reality check? What is different from where you are outside of the field and now you are inside the field?
Well, interesting question, but essentially to say that there are still many avenues to make impact. For example, you saw me in the market, right? And I still try to keep it real. So I don't believe that one being in government should preclude one from actually still being a member of the society. So little things that one can do to remain real and all of that. The problem with government is a behemoth. Okay, so as you're doing your own bit, you don't know what the next person is doing, and sometimes that can also undo whatever it is you're doing. But of course, I'm just an advisor. So as President Obasanjo told us a long time ago, your own is to advise, my own is to take. So everybody must know their bounds and stick to their bounds, So, but it's not a big deal. What I see is that like I said, the reforms that the present administration is taking on is very, very profound, if you like. Call it risky. But again, like they say in finance, high risk, high return. Okay, so what I see is we're trying to actually remake the economy and jar us out of our reverie. But of course, things like this inflation will come up. How quickly we're able to rein it in and ensure that we keep people happy is a key challenge, but I think that it can be done. We have made a reform on oil subsidy. We're getting a lot of money in. The other time, Tawe Yedele was the one said that we're on subsidy reform and the Naira, the bridging of the gap between the official and the unofficial market or black market, we are saving about 8 trillion. Indeed, That was before the new initiative that took the official rates to about 1,400. If you look at it that way, you know, we probably are saving about 12 trillion. Now, the point then becomes, okay, what do we do and how do we deploy this 12 trillion to begin to impact the people? Whereas the people will want you to give them that cash now, say, look, just give me my money and I know what to do with it. But the challenge of government is to ensure that such new inflow, or call it a windfall, even though it's a windfall in naira, not a windfall in dollar, is deployed in the right direction. For example, now, like I said earlier on, we could right now have a revolution of roads at the state level. Roads. All of those internal roads, all of those roads that lead to the farm, we could actually just focus on that now before the arbitrage advantage disappears. Yeah. We could have a revolution on building, okay? On housing, for example, for the people, low-cost housing, because the material. And if you're having those two alone, that's a lot of jobs for our people. And you know what? I was going to say that whereas a lot of people have jackpot from
Mr. Fasua.
Reverse jackpot now. Number one, of course,
Mr. Fasua.
Let me just make this point.
Yeah.
Can I just make this point, please?
Yeah, 30 seconds,
apart from the fact that 30 seconds. So apart from the fact that to jackpot has become a little bit more difficult because of the rate, but you know, a lot of Nigerians are coming back home to get their medicals done now, to come and see their doctors here. In the UK, there's 7 million people waiting to see the NHS. There's a waiting, equally in Canada. And of course, in the US, medicals are so extremely prohibitive. To have a child in the US, normally you probably will pay $30,000.
10 more
just
seconds.
Because you went to have a child normally
10 more seconds.
So let's be hopeful that a lot will happen for us.
You mentioned an instructive word earlier on. You talked about revolution, and it was reminiscent of the word agricultural revolution that we've been hearing for a very long time and from past administrations. We would need that as well as the need for our silos to be functional. You talked about reserves, but we've been hearing about some silos being privatized, some non-functional. So perhaps you would help us remind government about all of that as well. Mr. Temitope Fasua is a special advisor to the President on economic matters. Thank you very much for your time and contribution on the program.
Thank you.
Yes. And up next on the program is that very important need for us to be safety conscious as far as our wirings are concerned and, our households are concerned. We'll bring you that conversation after this time out. Stay with us.